and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And my co-host over there on the bathroom floor licking up some blood is Matt Freeman. Matt, how's it going down there?
Me gusta.
Okay, that is Spanish. This week on the show, we are beginning a new topic for our ongoing Deconstructing Directors series. It's a very exciting time. I'm so happy to be starting this.
That's right, Scott. For those of you that might be joining us for the very first time here, on this series, we dive deep into the filmography of a director of our choosing, going chronologically from their first film to their last. We're trying to explore the films and connect them together to see if we can learn about these directors, what inspires them, what challenges them, what makes them tick, what makes them so damn good at their job.
That's right. In the past, we've done a series on the Wachowski sisters, M. Night Shyamalan, and David Fincher. But this time, for the next few months, we're going to be taking a look at the 10 films directed by Mexican director Guillermo Del Toro. First up on this week's episode, we've got his debut film, 1993's Cronos. So we're going to be talking all about that debut film. It will be a full spoilers discussion of Cronos. So if you have not seen it yet, we strongly recommend you do so. I think this is one of those movies that really works better if you go in as blind as possible. At least it did for me. So really recommend you do that. And then after we talked about Cronos, we are going to wrap this week's episode up by circling back around to last week's conversation about The Princess Bride. We're going to see how this movie fared in our vote, how our listeners decided about The Princess Bride. Is it worthy of entering the canon of great films? We'll find out at the end of this episode. Ooh, it's exciting.
It is.
But let's just get right into it, Matt, and let's talk about Cronos, and let's talk about Guillermo Del Toro. Since this is the first episode of this Deconstructing Director series, I wanted to kind of start just talking generally about Del Toro and what we know of him before we have gone through his movies one by one. So Guillermo Del Toro was born October 9th, 1964 in Guadalajara, Mexico. He was raised by his Catholic grandmother. An interesting fact that might make some choices in this movie make a little bit more sense, Matt. Mm-hmm. He became a film nerd by his teenage years. He actually learned special effects and makeup work and creature work from Dick Smith, who is an extremely famous makeup artist who has done some of the craziest and well-respected monster creature work in the business. I think you will know him from his work on The Exorcist, which is famous and lauded. He's very, so he got the opportunity to kind of train under this guy early in his career. And I think part of that kind of defined what he's interested in and what types of movies he likes to do. The projects he's made, this is the funniest thing about Guillermo del Toro, Matt, is the projects that he's successfully made are almost as well known as the projects that he didn't get to make. In fact, there is a whole Wikipedia page for Guillermo del Toro's unrealized projects. There are it's divided out by decade, and there are heartbreaking things each decade, things that he's either specifically signed on to do that fell through, or things that just never really materialized. I think the one that breaks my heart the most is At the Mountains of Madness, the H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. That's a passion project for Del Toro that he really wanted to do, and it just never happened. But there's plenty of other crazy movies that if you look at this list, it'll just break your heart a little bit.
It'd be fun to dive into the ones that he wanted to make and why and what he had planned for them. Like even though the movie didn't get made, maybe some planning was done and there'd be something to read into there. That might be a fun conversation to have.
Sure,
at some
maybe.
Point.
Yeah, maybe we can circle back around to that at the very end of this whole thing. I think that'd be a good capper on this conversation.
Cool.
He is a director that's another writer-director, and there's only going to be one film that we'll be covering during the course of this thing that is a movie that he did not write. That will be Blade 2. He's been nominated for 3 Academy Awards and finally won his first one in 2018 for our final film in the series, The Shape of Water. So we'll be wrapping it up with his Academy Award-winning film, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
So let's talk about Del Toro generally. I guess the way to start with this, Matt, is what's your experience? What's your past with Del Toro? I think David Fincher, our last director we did for this, is one that we both have spent a lot of time with. We watched a lot of his movies. Have you seen a lot of these Del Toro films? What's your past with this director?
So I guess I've seen 6 of his films now that I've watched Cronos, although I honestly hadn't heard of Cronos before.
So you were right down the middle before we started this project, half and half.
Yeah. Actually, I'm wondering, I might have seen Mimic. No, I haven't seen Mimic. Sorry, that's a different movie.
Mm,
That's a different movie. But yeah, so I've seen about half. Yeah.
okay.
So fairly familiar, but he wasn't like, honestly, he's not somebody who I think of as like, oh, I've got to see every Del Toro movie. Like I don't have him situated in that spot in my brain. So I'm looking forward to studying all the movies that I haven't seen, because obviously he is extremely well regarded and everybody loves him, and his, his unique vision is what he's known for. I don't think we've really said
Yeah.
that yet here, but like, the thing everybody knows about Del Toro is the style, the iconic, memorable, very often creepy and startling visuals.
Yeah.
Um, and so I know I have a lot in store for me when I haven't seen several of his movies that are presumably full of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, his Catholic upbringing is so evident in every single one of his movies, especially this one we're about to be talking about. So he uses a lot of Catholic imagery in his movies. There's a lot of monsters and creatures and gross stuff in these movies. He plays in genre. That's, every single one of these movies I think would be considered a genre movie. Not the same genre. It's not always just horror, but he really loves to play in the genre space. And I think his career is interesting because he kind of jumps back and forth between doing these small independent pictures and doing a big Hollywood production, right? Like Blade 2, Hellboy, Pacific Rim. These are giant Hollywood movies. And then there's things like Cronos, like The Devil's Backbone, like Pan's Labyrinth, like Crimson Peak, and the Shape of Water, which are much smaller independent films that are not Hollywood fare.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he likes both of those, and I think both of them speak to the person he is and the director he is, but in different ways. And so it's
Sure.
interesting seeing him jump around like that.
Yeah, he seems like one of those genuine artistic types where he likes to be able to control every aspect of the thing, but then he also likes to be able to do really big and bold things, which are going to require a lot of money. And yeah, so that's cool. It's going to be
Hmm.
fun to see maybe the differences between those two types of movies, because that's of course
Yeah,
one thing we like to do on these shows is draw out like patterns.
yeah,
Um, so yeah,
yeah. And I think there's going to be some patterns very quickly. This is kind of a weird episode in that is that we have a sample size of one, so we can't
right.
start drawing too many patterns. And everything we are drawing is based on our historical knowledge of him, not at this in-depth project. But I think there's going to be a lot to say. I think, his second film, the film we're going to be covering next week, is Mimic, which is a big Hollywood, well, not big, it's a Hollywood picture. This was his first foray into working for the studio system. And as we will discuss next week, he didn't have a good time there. So I think comparing Mimic and Cronos is going to be really, really interesting. But
All right.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's stop and talk about Cronos. Matt, what is Cronos about?
Cronos, a mysterious device designed to provide its owner with eternal life, resurfaces after 400 years, leaving a trail of destruction in its path.
That is correct. That is the movie. As we said before, this movie was written and directed by Guillermo Del Toro. It came out in 1993 when he was just 29 years old. So just let that sink in, Matt, and feel like you've accomplished nothing and you've wasted your entire life. Um, this movie, it was a small independent picture. It played at Cannes and did very well. It actually took home the grand prize during Critics Week at Cannes and was pretty heavily well reviewed. It is currently sits at a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think just about any critic you could think of has had some pretty nice things to say about it. Roger Ebert definitely enjoyed this movie. But I want to know, what did you think of it, Matt? You hinted that you had not seen Cronos before, so this is your first experience with this movie. What'd you think?
Had not seen this movie, had not heard of this movie, had no clue what genre, tone, anything this movie was in, which made it even more fun, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up liking it quite a lot. I see why it was well regarded. It definitely was not anything like what I expected. I guess I didn't know what to expect. But it has some of the things that I think of as being characteristic of Del Toro, but also it's a lot more like there's less of it. Maybe you could say, like it's got effects, but they're a minor part of the story. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What did you think of the movie?
I really enjoyed it. This is a movie that I too had not seen. I actually found out that I ran out during a Criterion sale and bought this movie, the Criterion Collection version of this movie, like 4 years ago, and then in a classic Criterion collector fashion, just never watched it.
Uh-huh.
So this was the first time I had watched it as well. I knew nothing about it other than it was his first movie, and I really enjoyed it. I think it is very surprising in what it is and what it becomes, and we'll get into that later. I think it is a movie that, like, I'm not going to sit here and say this is my favorite Del Toro movie. It's definitely not. And I'm saying this at the beginning of this project, and I don't expect that to change by the end of it. It is a movie that feels like a director's first foray into the art form. It feels like a movie that's trying to figure out what he wants to do, what kind of artist he wants to be, and it's interesting in that way, but that doesn't make it like his masterpiece or anything.
Yeah.
And like that comes off more negative than I want it to be, because I do think there's a lot to like here. It's just a first movie. It's a first movie in that, like, all the hallmarks of who this man is going to become are there, definitely, but he's not quite there yet. But for 29, it's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think as I'm sitting here thinking about this and really, starting to get into the deconstructing director's groove, thinking about this movie, I'm noticing actually that I'm being a bit narrow and sort of stereotyping what his thing is, right? Because everybody says, "Oh, it's the visuals," and it's like, okay, that's the most obvious thing.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing that this movie does really well is a lot of actually just slow building visual storytelling, which is
Sure.
not visual storytelling in the sense that there's like an amazing Technicolor setting. It's just you're watching this man go about his life for I don't know, it feels like a good solid 20 minutes of just watching Jesus Gris live his life, and with a couple of unusual things happening thrown in there, but like you're just
Sure.
seeing him in his home, seeing him at his workplace, seeing him interact with his granddaughter, which he loves dearly.
Mm-hmm.
Slow, giving a lot of space and a lot of time for you to connect with the character. And when I think about his other movies, I think he does that a lot, actually. I think this is a thing that, like, he's very good at slowly introducing you to the characters and letting you get to know them before he starts hitting you with plot.
Yeah. I mean, this is a movie about a magic alchemist stone bug that grants eternal life, and spoilers, turns the person into a vampire. We'll get to that in a bit, but that is what the movie is about, but that is not what the movie is. This is a movie, in my opinion, about family, about relationships. You have these two different families that the movie spends a lot of time with. You have Jesus Gris, and his wife and his granddaughter and their relationship, and then you have De La Guardia and his nephew, I think it is,
Yeah.
and their relationship, and it kind of is a movie that spotlights the way in which you have two relationships that are strained, kind of, and the ways in which the choices people make can either destroy those relationships or strengthen those relationships. And that is what this movie is about to me. That is the core of the movie. And so I think family, I think relationships between family is definitely something that I, from my past experiences with Del Toro's movies, remember something very specific. So it is really nice to see in this very first movie that this is something that he is very, very interested in and wants to explore. And when I read that little factoid about the fact that he was raised by his grandmother, I like, everything became clear, right? Like, this is a movie in which it's a grandfather. Like, we don't know where the child's parents are. We don't know where Aurora's parents are, but we can assume that they're no longer with us, because he talks about his son. He talks about experiences he had raising his son, but they're gone. So I kind of love that Del Toro leaves that. It's not necessary. All we know is that they're not around anymore, and he's responsible for this kid.
I think that's perfect. So that nicely brings us to, like, the big theme of this movie that I wanted to talk about, which may be a kind of a general thing that he's interested in, but it's clearly the theme of this movie, because the movie is called Cronos. Okay.
Yeah.
The theme is time. And time is something that is just all throughout this movie in really interesting and really creative ways. Like that's
Yeah.
I very quickly was like, oh, I'm giving this movie a lot of points for uh, for writing, basically for being clever in how it's playing with this theme. Because okay, let's think about time. You've got the element of people getting old and dying, and you lose them, and they're gone. They're in the past
Hmm.
now. Is happening with the girl's father slash Jesus' son. You've got physical aging and dying in the form of the uncle who his body's falling apart inexorably, can't reverse it.
Yeah.
You've got Ron Perlman's nose, which is repeatedly broken, and he's trying to look into getting plastic surgery to fix it, which you might just want to write off as a gag, but like getting injured and wanting to like repair and reverse the injuries is yet another manifestation of time, and he clearly wants to reverse it, just like his
Yeah.
his uncle wants to stop getting older. Um,
I
and
love that, like, that it is definitely a gag, but you're
yeah,
you're right that it is playing into the themes. I
yeah,
mean, it's like one of the first things we see is Ron Perlman looking in a mirror at his obviously been broken before nose.
yeah.
And we don't even know how that happened. I think I like to assume that it's just his uncle again, because we see his uncle break it again at the end of the movie. I just like, this is part of this abusive relationship he has with his uncle. That was the original break, and it's just happened again and again and again.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. And of course, I mean, the fact that a big plot movement happens when they're at a New Year's Eve party is,
yeah,
signifying time passing. These are just the ones that I jotted off quickly. There's probably way more manifestations of this theme of time throughout the movie, but I really enjoyed, like, while watching it, kind of noticing and appreciating all of these.
yeah. I mean, the just aesthetically, the Kronos device itself is just this perfect ticking clock device, right? Like, I mean, it is visually a scarab that pokes you with needles, but every time we cut to the inside of it, I love that Del Toro does that. I love that Del Toro gives us this internal shot where we see the gears turning. I love the first time we see it, we see the gears turning one way, and then they slow down and then start rewinding the other way. It's just like a perfect visual cue to what's going on, and
Hmm.
that we see the little bug in there. So yeah, I mean, there is the image and the motif of time. Like, I think the finale takes place on top of a building, of De La Guardia's building, and I think between De La and Guardia there's a giant clock, right? So they're like fighting up there, and there's like a clock in the middle of it.
That's great.
So yeah, I mean, these are people that are the thing that I think I love most about it is, yes, Jesus is an old man, and like, I think it's clear at the beginning of the movie that, like, he's a person that's kind of young at heart, but like, it's such an interesting, I don't know how to say this, like, he's raising a little girl, which I think is exhausting. And he's a grandfather, right? So he's already done this once, and now he's kind of forced to do it again. I love the scene where at the very beginning he's playing hopscotch in his thing, which is a children's game. So like,
Hmm.
he's trying to participate in this stuff. So I think there is part of him that very much wishes he could be younger. And the irony of that is that he is in a store. He's the owner of an antique store, right? He is an owner of a store that is just filled with a bunch of old shit. And the that is an interesting image, right, of
Hmm.
this guy who's playing hopscotch, who's trying to raise this young girl who wants to be younger, in a store filled with stuff that is so old it's considered an antique now.
Hmm.
Um and and I like that there's a different version of the story that I think is just told from Guardia's perspective of a person that wants the youth so badly, and they grab this thing and then it destroys them. But like, he never wanted, like, it's not like he was searching
Yeah.
for a way to be younger. It just kind of fell into his lap, and once it had, he couldn't help himself, because who could, right? Like, I mean, like, the first time you use this thing and then suddenly you feel 10 years younger, like, who could resist that?
Yeah.
But I just love that the structure of it is that he wasn't asking for this. It just kind of happened, and that's a different kind of fountain of youth, the follies of trying to chase youth story than we typically see.
Yeah, right. In his case, it's almost something that just happens to him. It's something
Yeah.
something that befalls him, because the first time he uses it, he has no idea really what it is. It's completely an accident. And then you almost have to wonder, like, could he have ever possibly reversed it at that point, or was it already too late?
Yeah.
And
Well, I love that.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that we see that it's like, he interrupted the process the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's like driving him insane.
Yeah.
Like he's up in the middle of the night, he's itching his hand, he's hot, and it's like he needs it. It's the only way to stop the scratching.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's got its hooks into you, and unless you finish it, it's just going to drive you insane.
I think maybe my favorite single scene of the movie was actually fairly early on, and it's I think it's the second time. It's the first time he uses it intentionally, I guess, where like it's established how much he cares for this granddaughter, and like he loves her like a daughter. He takes care of her so well. He's so sweet and caring toward her, and he would never do anything to hurt her or scare her. And he's so like freaked out and sick basically that he just ends up using this device like on the stairs and then like sliding weirdly down the stairs with his shirt pulled open. And you see that the daughter, the granddaughter sees him, and it's this terribly like uncomfortable, shameful moment for him. And I thought that played really, really well, because like you're in that moment, it hasn't become a vampire story yet. It's a story about this old guy who's trying to raise this girl, and something really weird is happening to him, and he's losing control. And it I don't know, it just felt very like human, and I just thought it was a great scene, a great moment.
Yeah, and I think what I really like is the scene after that, when I don't know if it's directly after that or not, but when he wakes up the next morning and can't find the device, and he goes and has this conversation with his granddaughter, and because she's hidden it, because she recognizes this thing from the very beginning as exactly what it was, a dangerous thing that he shouldn't be using. And he tells the story about the time his son learned about lung cancer, and his son stole all his cigarettes and destroyed all his cigarettes. And he's like, but what he didn't realize is that actually wouldn't help at all. But what it did succeed in is letting me know that he was worried about me. And so I got to acknowledge, so he got to know that I knew that he was worried about me. And that's where he leaves the conversation with her. But he keeps using the thing. Like, it's like, it doesn't sink in. Like, he's like, I acknowledge that you are worried about me, and I'm going to keep you around because I care about you. I'm not going to do anything that would harm you, but I'm going to just keep smoking, proverbially. Like, I'm just going to keep doing the thing that is making you worried in the first place. It shows the way that relationship is fracturing. And I think part of the arc of the movie is that he finally gets to a place at the end where he can just destroy it to save what the remnants of what his family is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he accepts, not only that he's getting older, but his own death. He basically causes his own death now, and it's a heroic sacrifice. And I mean, it's not that there aren't occasional heroic sacrifices in vampire movies, but you like you mentioned earlier, usually they're more of like a tragic fall type of story.
Yeah. So, I mean, was that your interpretation of the end, that he's just laying there waiting for the sun to kill him in the morning?
I'm not even sure if that really happened. Because it specifically says that if you, or the uncle, I forget everybody's name. The uncle said that if you destroy the device, the device, you'll die.
Yeah.
And he destroys the device. And so I kind of thought like maybe he just dies right there. And that's sort of a vision of him sort of just symbolically showing us that he's reached peace, and, his family loved him and they'll be okay, and he's going to move on. And like, I don't necessarily think they actually like carted him back to his bed where he died. Like, I don't know if that really happened or not. Maybe you interpret it differently, but
I mean, I like that interpretation. I'm not sure. I just love the image of like him laying in the bed and his wife and his daughter like coming to them, and them all just like laying down together as this perfect way of leaving the movie, of like the relationship has been mended. The things have been fixed.
Yeah.
I liked that. I liked that interpretation, and yours makes it a little more sad. But I mean, I think there is something to be said of, okay, so either he's just a vampire forever now, or he's just gonna die. like they're gonna have to supply him with some human blood, or he's just gonna die. I do think I do think he needs to, and the way that scene is shot, like he's laying in a bed that is basically coffin-esque. It's not a big bed. It doesn't fit more than one person really. It's just him. So
Yeah.
I do think that him dying there, but some, like I like to think that it still happened though, that he like in his last moments walked home, and because he's like he's ripped all his flesh off, right? He's like fully the weird
Yeah. The
white
marble. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I like to think he like walked back there, and just the final moment of his family coming together to say goodbye to him, and then our movie ends.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I liked. But
sure, I don't think I prefer one of those over the other. I think in the moment, I definitely just assumed it was kind of a vision,
mm-hmm.
which is an interesting thing. Like I don't know. Is that I'm trying to think if like sort of dream visions, things that didn't really happen, can be called a Del Toro conceit, because that's Pan's Labyrinth through and through, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean he deals with fairy tale and dream logic and dreamy movies all the time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like whether or not that specific event ever happened or not, I do think this is a movie that deals in that kind of fairy tale dream logic thing quite a bit, because it's just this kind of it's kind of magical realism a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's this otherworldly things happening in just a normal world, and it makes you question them all. Like just I think one of my favorite scenes is him on the floor of the bathroom looking up the little puddle of blood, and that just is like perfectly unsettling, because it is this clean, austere, real location, and this man just on the ground
Yeah.
licking blood.
It's
Beautifully shot. So
yeah,
I don't know.
a sequence that I love for sort of its magical realism is a good term, but the tone was so unique, where they have his body in the mortuary,
Mm-hmm.
and they, the whole time it's so incredibly tense, because like the guy is starting to, he's preparing his body. They put his body out on display. Then they bring him back to cremate him, and like the whole time you're like nervous, because you're like, okay, I know he's gonna wake up.
Yeah.
Like I get what this movie is doing at this point. I know he's gonna wake up. We wouldn't even be showing this if he wasn't gonna wake up. But it's like it's all. But then contrasted with that, it's just so mundane. And you've got this mortuary worker guy who's just kind of enjoying. He likes fixing up bodies, and he likes cremating bodies. He's kind of easygoing fella. And I mean, I loved how that all played out. And then he, like he leaves for a second and then comes back, and the camera just gives you like a half a second showing you that the coffin is empty just before it closes it.
Yeah.
And that's like all you get there. Just something about that whole sequence. I was just like, nobody else would have written it this way, and nobody else would have filmed it this way to just make it feel this creepy and yet mundane at the same time, which I think causes that tone that I'm calling magical realism, even though I don't even know if that's gesturing at the right thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, like, I think no other director shoots that sequence of events that way. Like any other director will show him getting out of the coffin, right?
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't resist falling back on the vampire trope of vampire rises from the coffin for the first time. Del Toro doesn't do that. Del Toro sticks with the working class mortuary guy. And yeah, I mean, it's this perfect, the energy and the tone of the scene, I think, is really wonderful. It's a good microcosm of this movie as a whole, because this is a funny movie. Like there's funny, cute, silly moments of this movie that is about this incredibly sad, the world's saddest vampire, I think we can call him. It's great, and it has so much style to it. I think you're absolutely right that like there's the way the camera does that whole scene where Del Toro will not let us look at Jesus, and we're waiting for him to wake up. And Del Toro he tries to light the thing and it breaks, so he has to go down below. And like the whole time we're like, he's getting up right now. He's fucking getting up right now. But we don't get to see that. Yeah, and like there are small changes. Like he comes up the stairs and the back door is open and he just shuts it. And then the coffin's open and he just doesn't notice and shut it. The suit that he hung up on the wall is gone. But we don't get to see any of that happen. And that's actually my favorite touch in the whole fucking movie. Is that the suit, because it's one of those suits that's designed to just wrap over, right? So it buckle or it straps in the back, So for the entire rest of the movie, Jesus is wearing a suit on his back, and it's just it's the perfect way to visually show the insanity and absurdity of this whole situation, because he's wearing a backwards suit. Like he's the least Dracula-esque vampire ever.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
there's no suave, like,
no, he looks like crap.
yeah, he looks awful. And that's, I mean, I guess this is a good way to kind of transition to the thing we've been gesturing at the whole time, is that this is a surprise vampire movie. That if you went into this movie knowing absolutely nothing about it, like both you and I did, you don't realize until maybe 35, maybe 45 minutes in that, oh, we're just doing the vampire thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I wasn't even fully convinced until he's in the attic with his daughter, and the sunlight comes through, and he puts his hands in front of his face. I was like, oh, we're just going like full vampire. Like, I had known that he's drinking blood. I had known that he's not dead, right? So, I mean, you could say that the clues are all there, but like, I didn't really just think, oh, we're just doing vampire, until the sunlight part of it came into it.
I think the first time it crossed my mind is when he's standing in front of the fridge, and he's like, he's trying to quench his thirst, and he just drinks like a ridiculous amount of water, and he can't quench his thirst, and then he sees the meat, and then you're like, wait a second, is this like a like a vampire zombie axis type thing? Is he gonna turn into a monster? That was the first time it crossed my mind. But then, like you said, it takes so long to actually just be like just literal vampire. And it's fun. It's fun because there is no vampire legend that I'm aware of that's like, yeah, you get this scarab trinket, and the scarab trinket stabs you with venom or whatever, and then you're like, no, that's in no vampire legend. So like it just misleads you into thinking like, oh, it's an alchemist, and so it's going to be some weird alchemy thing.
Which it is. It's just a weird alchemy as source of vampirism, and the word vampire is never said in this movie, which I quite love. But yeah, I mean, it's such a Del Toro thing to do, and I think that's a sentence that doesn't make a lot of sense here at the beginning, but I think by the end of this entire conversation, by the end of this series, will make a lot more sense. That like, he takes a well-trod genre conceit. Like, it is very rare that I get to say the phrase, this is a wholly original vampire origin story, but it's the truth.
Yeah,
it is. Like, it has never been done before this way, and it's new and interesting, and it's a surprise vampire. You don't even realize it, and I think that's such a fun trick that he played on us there, that he put it right in front of our eyes. I agree with you. Like, you see the blood, you see him lick up the blood, you know that he's going to live forever. You can start drawing the connections, but I don't think your brain ever just fully says, like, there are so many movies and genre horror pictures that are like, it's not vampires, but it's like kind of vampires. And that's kind of where my brain was going. It's like, oh, it's not vampirism, but it's like a kind of riff on it. But no, this isn't a riff. This is just it. Except it's all backwards.
Yeah, this is the only way to kill them is a stake through the heart. Right. And that's how, in fact, like, if you've been paying attention from the beginning, you would notice that the alchemist dies because he's pierced through the heart by a piece of wood. And that's so it's interesting how the movie, but like the actual very beginning of the movie is this, creepy alchemist guy, and then they find a woman that's been exsanguinated in his apartment, and like a whole bunch of dresses showing that he's done this a bunch of times. And then we're like, and then we just move into Jesus Gris and his happy existence with his daughter, and it's just like that casts a pall over all of that stuff, over the happy antique dealer living his happy life, because you're like, okay, well, we got some dark shit in the background here that we're gonna have to deal with that. But I do think the movie is always zigging when you think it's going to zag. I think that's one of the most fun things about it, is you don't know it. Like, there's no way you could predict what's going to happen in this movie. Like, I remember it's about the halfway point that he dies, right? That Ron Perlman like captures him and then pushes him off the edge of a cliff with a car. And I just remember being like, I don't
know what's gonna happen next.
Mhm.
They go to the mortuary, and once they go to the mortuary, you're like, okay, he's gonna get up again, and we're gonna do all that. But then what? Then what is the plot of the movie gonna be from that point on? And there's a lot of Frankenstein in this as well. I think when he's like returning to his home and wanting his daughter to accept him, and he looks like a monster at this point.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of that in there too. And I don't know. It's a movie that constantly surprised me. I wasn't sure how it was going to end, and who was going to do what, and I just was along for the ride the entire time.
Yeah. Well, I think, the fact that it looks like a monster, I think that was a pretty creative touch, because he rightly points out, like, I my skin is rotting, like I'm rotting alive.
Yeah.
And then it takes the other guy being like, that's just your outer skin.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he looks so scary and like more like a Frankenstein, like a zombie than a vampire. But then you realize, like, well, okay, he's got the Dracula thing going on, but he just has to rip off all of his skin first.
What a wonderful effect too! Like when he reaches out and grabs the first bit of skin. Oh, it's so gross.
Yeah.
And the way Del Toro lights this movie, like for the rest of the movie, it's like that white bits of his face are kind of glowing, or they're popping a little bit. Like it's so white, it's so pure as compared to the dirt and grime of everything else, that it just pops out, and it makes it even more uncomfortable. Ugh.
Yeah.
Can we talk about some of the set design? Because like we talked about the room in the store, the antique dealer store, but De La Guardia, his room is hilarious. It's okay. It doesn't make any sense. Can we talk about his clean room and how it doesn't make any sense?
It doesn't make any sense. I know exactly what you mean, but yes, please go on.
So you can, the elevator shares not even a wall, an open space with the clean room, right? So you go up, and like you can see into the clean room without a wall from the elevator, and then you walk out of the other side of the elevator, and then like have to slide a tray through a door there. And I'm just like, what? Like what? Why would you not build a complete wall there? Why is there that little? It doesn't make any sense. And like, there's so much of this room that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that he's just having his x-rays on the wall at all times. It doesn't make any sense that he's saved every single one of these archangel statues that doesn't have the device in it he's looking for.
And they've got like plastic over them, making them look like ghosts.
Yeah.
And his organs, of course.
Yeah, he's got all his pieces of his body that he's been ripped out, just sitting in jars, and like his bed has this thing draped over it. Like it's this Howard Hughes like obsessive clean room environment, except it doesn't make any sense, and that's perfect. I loved it. Like that must have been an intentional choice.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense as a place to live. It doesn't make any sense as like a functional clean room, because God, the doorway that the food comes in through, where Ron Perlman like moves, like just bring it through the door. Why are you?
Why are you doing that?
None of this makes any sense.
I think it's a perfect thing that's showing like Ron Perlman's doing it because he's supposed to, but he doesn't actually give a shit about any of it. Like he just doesn't, and that's his character, right? He just doesn't give a shit about anything that his uncle is doing. He's his gopher. He's his brute that gets the things he needs, but he doesn't even know. He's never put in the know about any of it. And the irony of that is, of course, his whole purpose for being here is that he's like waiting for his uncle to die,
right? And
then the first scene is like, we've got an updated copy of your will for you to sign. I was like, oh really, Ron Perlman? I wonder what that says. But so he's just waiting for him to die, and meanwhile his uncle is looking for a device that will never let him die.
Yeah, and eventually he finds that out, but it's like he doesn't believe it. It doesn't take it seriously.
Yeah. I love his reaction. It's like all he does is shit and piss all day. Like, why does he want to live more? It's such a great reaction.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's he kind of loses it at the end, because like he clearly killed Jesus, and now Jesus is back, and his reaction is like, no, I'm going to kill you again. It's like, no, like you should just run screaming at this point.
Yes. But I mean, that's like, to go back to the family metaphor, that is the complete dissolution of the family, right? That like by that time, both of those people are so far gone, and they lose their lives for it. There is like, I want to talk about the names because we hinted at some of the stuff before, but like Jesus is the name of our protagonist. Jesus Gris, which if you say that fast, like Jesus Christ, like Christ with a Spanish accent is Jesus Christ. So like it's real close. It's real close. He also is resurrected literally, but Ron Perlman's character is named Angel. Angel de la Guardia. Angel of the Guard is his name. So like I don't think Del Toro's being very subtle here with all this Christian imagery. It's really interesting. I don't think we ever learn what his uncle's name is. Like we know his last name, but I don't think we learn what his first name is.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's funny because I don't know, like, why would this monster be called Angel? I mean, I guess in a certain sense he's the vampire hunter, so you could say that's why. Like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a funny kind of deconstruction of Van Helsing or whatever, where like the vampire hunter is also just a huge asshole.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that's what this movie's doing, because like this is a monster movie in which you pity the monster, right? Jesus Gris does not kill anyone in this movie. He kills no one. He feeds on one person, and he didn't even kill that person. It's Angel that kills that person,
right?
So he is the pitiable, like he's the quote unquote monster. He's a vampire. But you do nothing but pity him. The real monster of the movie is Angel. The Angel is the real monster of the movie. And I think that represents the way the movie is turning all these things on its head. By the way, his granddaughter's name is Aurora, which means dawn. So that's fun too.
I wonder what the wife's name is. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Yeah. That's I like that. I didn't notice. I honestly didn't notice the names I mean, I noticed Jesus because that's Jesus. But yeah, I mean, you pointing out it sounds like Jesus Christ basically. It's pretty on the nose there. Yeah. Dieter. I don't know how to say that name. Sorry, I'm just looking up the names actually. Oh, her name is Mercedes, which is that's also biblical, right?
Oh gosh. Maybe. I don't know. It could be. I mean, it comes from mercy, right? Mercy, so yeah.
It's really we'll call that religious enough. Yeah.
Sure. The concept of mercy is fairly spiritual, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it shows. This is a movie where the first time I watched it, I really just kind of was like, oh, that's kind of I don't want to use the word slight because I hate when critics use the word slight, because my first question is always, well, what does that mean? What do you actually mean when you say that? But it felt like a movie that to me didn't have a lot going on. And then I did watch it again, and I started thinking about it, and no, there is actually a lot going on here. This movie's doing a whole lot of things. It's just not as readily apparent. And for some people, it's just a fun, weird vampire movie. So
yeah, right. I mean, you can like the attention to detail and the background, like just take, Mercedes, for example. Like her role is heartbreaking. Like if you pay attention to what's happening in the background, like she is this fully realized character there in the story. She doesn't have a lot of speaking lines, but like I love the scene where he comes out and he's shaved his mustache. And her reaction is like, she thinks it's hilarious, but she's trying to be nice. But like, it's not that she thinks he looks bad. It's like the very idea that he would express vanity at this point in his life is comical to her.
Right. She is a character that feels like she has fully accepted her role in life now, that she's on the back nine, she's heading towards the finish line of her life, and she's kind of accepted that. And it's not that she's not living. I love that she's a dance instructor, right? So we see she's active and involved and doing something that she loves, but she's also accepted this stuff, and he meanwhile cannot help but chase this idea of youth, which again, like if you're given a fountain of youth, I think it's very hard to not fall into that trap. But thanks for reminding me of the dance class, because like I was gonna say, I was gonna start like drawing out all of the small little scenes in the movie where it's like
you could cut this scene out and it wouldn't hurt the movie,
Hmm.
but I love that it's in there. And I was like, but then I was like failing to think of them. So the first one I thought of was Mercedes and the mustache, and then of course, yeah, she's a dance instructor, and we get
Hmm.
this fairly, surprisingly lengthy scene where we just see, she's teaching the tango, and that
Yeah.
she has this joy de vivre actually, and it's like, that's, hey, this is one way to keep the lingering specter of death at bay, is just enjoy life. Just
Right.
enjoy life while you're alive. It doesn't matter that you're getting older. Like, just do what you can.
And narratively, the only purpose that scene has is that Jesus shows up at the very end of it with his damaged hand, and
Yeah.
she dresses his wound. So like it in the functional narrative lens, it doesn't have any purpose, but it is also entirely purposeful because, yeah, I mean, she has this arc going on in the background. We know while he's sitting on the toilet with the thing on his heart, and she's getting ready for the New Year's Eve party, she's talking to him about how she needs him to check her dress because it's so much smaller than it was only a year ago.
Uh-huh.
Which is just, that's part of aging, right?
Uh-huh.
She's getting older. Her metabolism is slowing down. You put on weight faster. The older you get, kind of the bigger you get. It's just one of the things that happens. And I think she is a little bit more resigned to her spot, but it's also, that's still a realization that people are going through, and he's not there for her.
Yeah.
He's in his own world chasing his own youth while she's dealing with the truth of aging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the New Year's Eve party is another great example of that, because he runs off to chase after the nosebleed guy so he can drink his blood.
Right.
And before we cut away to Ron Perlman and Jesus in the car and that whole great conversation they have, Del Toro like pans the camera over to Aurora and Mercedes as New Year's is happening, as they're counting down, and they're alone. They're not, like, he's left them. He's run off to do his own thing and he's left them behind, and they're there sad and alone. She doesn't have her husband with her to kiss on New Year's.
Right.
And that is a little touch that really sells the disintegration of their familial relationship, which is such an important part of the movie.
Yeah. And prior to that, I think it's interesting that he has been basically this horn dog throughout the first part of the party, where it seems like you get the impression from the context, like he's not really acting like himself. He's acting younger and like he's being more flirtatious and kind of coming on to her, and she really is delighted by it actually.
Mm-hmm.
But then like you said, he disappears, and it's if anything, that makes it sadder, because it was like he was trying to rekindle this relationship with her, with his newfound, sense of energy and youth. And then, but no, he's too distracted. He's got to chase this drug basically, and that kills him. And then really the next thing we see of her that I can recall is either her at the funeral or her answering the phone, and it's him on the other end, which is just so sad.
And then she hangs up immediately. Yeah. I mean, probably partially because she refuses to believe her dead husband's talking to her on the phone. But like it again, in the metaphor of the disintegration of the family, he has died and he is gone and their relationship is kaput, right?
Yep.
So that's a great way of doing that. Yeah. I wonder if there was ever a draft of this story in which he tried to get her to do it too, right? There's no indication that like it only works for one person at a time. So I wonder if there was ever a temptation there for the character. I feel like that's where things would have gone had he not been horribly murdered and then turned into a zombie looking guy. But we never get to see that part.
I mean, it depends on how bad things had gotten. Like if he had found that his skin had started, like I wonder, would his skin have started sloughing off if he hadn't, died? Or is this sort of like the undead thing where like as soon as you become a vampire, you're undead? It's just a matter of time before the change happens.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I don't have a clear answer, because we see the device literally is de-aging him, right? He's looking younger, he's looking more vibrant and healthier, and I think they do a pretty good job. I mean, the mustache is one way they make him look younger. I think his hair seems a little bit thicker, and they're just doing this through makeup and effects and lighting and stuff, but he looks younger, he looks thinner, he looks healthier. But eventually we know via the alchemist that eventually that all is going to go away. So yeah, I mean, I think we have to assume that eventually like his skin is just going to die off. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually very curious regarding that effect. Like, is this actually an actor who's only like 50 and they just made him look older in the beginning and then they removed the stuff that made him look older? And because like I feel like the actor is probably just like you know, a young looking 50 with a lot of energy, and he's just acting a lot older than that in the beginning of the movie, and then he just kind of dials it back as the movie goes on. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, he was 59
Okay, yeah,
when the movie was shot. So,
not too
but they
bad.
do make him seem older than that. They make him seem
Yeah,
in his 70s or something.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, he moves slowly. He doesn't see, he's stiff and all that, and then yeah,
Yeah.
and then he kind of becomes an action hero by the end. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about on this one?
I don't think so. Not that I can think of.
I do like that we see Del Toro's love of Ron Perlman here from the very beginning, because I think Perlman is a person we're going to be seeing a lot of throughout the course of this series.
Yeah,
He's going to be back again and again.
yeah. Just one small thing I wanted to point out is like I just love how we never really get a clear look at the bug inside the device. It's just tantalizingly obscured by the machinery, and that makes it way creepier to me for some reason. I just thought that was a cool touch.
I mean, that's a good point. I agree with that. Like, it's enough that I love that we get to see it, and I love that like we get to wonder. Like, I think it kind of looks scarab-esque. I'm guessing like it has a similar look to the contraption it's inside of, but yeah.
It seems to have like weird parts that don't correspond to any part of an actual bug, and that just makes you. And then you're like, well, I want to see the whole thing. I want to see I want to picture. I want to actually see it, and the movie never lets you see it, and that makes it even more like creepy. Like, what's creepier than a bug is a bug where you're not really sure what it looks like actually.
Mm-hmm. And yet you're just letting this thing put its gunk in you.
Yeah.
I think the lesson of this thing is if you find a creepy device at the bottom of an archangel statue, don't let it sting you.
Yeah. Don't, or just in general, don't stab yourself with ancient artifacts, I would say.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. That's the Doof Media lesson of the week. Do not stab yourself with ancient artifacts. Thank you.
There you go.
I think we all learned something valuable today.
Please comment below with any time that you've stabbed yourself with an ancient artifact and tell us how that went.
Yeah, let us know how long it took for your skin to alchemize into an alabaster white form.
Yes, please.
I actually like that. Like, so we haven't talked about alchemy very much, but I'm pretty sure like one of the quests of alchemy was to take things and then revert them to their like best form, right? Whether it be turning metals into gold, right? But also I think like this idea is you take skin or life and turn it into its greatest form, its best version. You alchemize it into its like eternal version, whatever. And so therefore like their skin being this alabaster white, this pure white, is kind of like a recognition of that alchemy has happened here. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, cool. Sure. That I mean I've never seen anyone connect the idea of alchemy and vampire before, and so I like that connection there. Cool.
Cool. Well, that is Del Toro's Cronos. Let us know what you thought of this movie if you watched it in preparation for this episode, or if you've just seen it before. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know what you thought about Cronos. Next week, we're going to be doing another Del Toro movie. We will be doing Mimic, a movie, for whatever reason, I watched a lot when I was a little kid. So it's going to be interesting revisiting it now and seeing if it holds up.
That's fascinating because I've never seen it somehow. And so that strikes me as weird, but okay.
I think it was one of those ones that played on TBS a lot.
Okay.
And so I just like would see it on and I just watch it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out next week. Doof. But before we shut everything down for the week, Matt, we have to circle back around to last week's Council of Doof episode. Last week we talked about The Princess Bride and whether or not it deserves entry into our canon of best films of all time. And both you and I said yes, easily yes, because it's The Princess Bride, of course. But we put that vote up to our community and our listeners, and the vote is in, Matt. And would you believe it? They agreed with us. I think this is the largest percentage in the history of our thing. 97% of our voters said yes, The Princess Bride should go into the canon. We did not get a comment from the individuals who voted no, so we won't ever get to know why they said no. But I am very curious.
I think we can assume they just have extremely high standards and probably will just not vote yes for anything short of the best movie in the world.
I think if I'm trying to be charitable here, which I am, I think a lot of the love of this movie, and I don't think anything we said was false. I think it's a very well constructed movie. It's good. It works. It's fun. But I do think there's also a lot of nostalgia factor attached to it. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
There's nostalgia there.
Well, yeah.
And if you weren't around at a time when this movie was like the movie to watch, or like I think we had one commenter who said they're from another country and this was a very like popular like American kids film. It just never was as popular overseas. So
Sure.
I think looking at this movie, watching this movie for the first time when you're like 30 years old, I don't know if it will have that powerful of an effect on you. I still think it's a remarkably well-made movie, but I could see that.
I could see that. I mean, I do remember a lot of what I said in that discussion was that when I was a kid, I didn't really think it was that funny. And I just kind of thought it was an okay movie when I was a kid. And watching it again this time, sitting down and giving it my full attention, I actually was really impressed. Thought it was much funnier than I remembered it being. Thought it was much better than I remembered it being. So, if anything, I after that experience, I was like, well, actually, there's more to it than just nostalgia. But obviously, nostalgia is a component.
Sure.
I just feel dumb for not having really thought it was funny when I was a kid. So.
Well, we were all dumb when we were kids.
That's true.
So, some of us grow out of it.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's it. Princess Bride joins our canon of films. We had someone tweeted us today, hey guys, wouldn't it be a good idea to put a list of all the films that are in the canon? And I was like, yeah, it would. I was supposed to do that 3 months ago, and I just haven't gotten around to it. We will do that. We will have a link. I'm not sure exactly where we're going to put that, but we will put a link that has all the films that are on the list, so where people can go see that list. Because we're making a list, we should display the list somewhere.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
We did that for the old Kryptonian collection. So
yeah, I was really good. That was back in the old day when I was good at doing my job, and then somewhere along the way I lost it, and I just can't get it back again.
What the fuck, Scott?
All right, so I think that's it for this week. Anything else you wanted to talk about? To throw an audible here at the end of the episode and just talk about some random shit.
I've been really into the video game God of War, the 2018 video game God of War lately.
I don't know if you remember, I talked to you about that pretty extensively, like a year ago, maybe more, when I played it. I tried not to spoil it, but I talked about how much I loved that game on the podcast a while ago.
Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning it, and I bought it at some point. So I've had it for a long time. Maybe I bought it because you recommended it, actually. But only recently did I like actually play it. And I'm somewhat playing it with my son, which is a fucking trip. Let me tell you, if you want to feel all the emotions, boy, get your shoes on. And then we both get to laugh at that and have an in-joke together. It's so great. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. I love that game. I played a few hours of it, I would say, enough to be like, oh, this is amazing. You find a thing and you're just like, oh, I have to tell everyone about this. But I mean, I'm so late to the party. Everyone else already knows about it, but it's as good as people say is what I'm going to say here. So.
Sure. Yeah. I totally agree with that assessment. It's been a while since I played it, but I really enjoyed that game too. I think it's some really great storytelling, and it's a fun game. I think it's perfect that you now, on the day the PlayStation 5 comes out, decide to finally get to one of the best games of the PlayStation 4 era. So there you go.
Yes, that's me, always a step late.
That's really cool. I want a PlayStation 5 so bad, but I bought a house and I made a baby, so I probably should not buy a $500 video game console. Like the adult in me is saying, you can't do this, Scott. Also, they don't exist anywhere. Like you
that
can't buy
helps.
them. Yeah. So like even if I wanted to buy one, there's nowhere to do it right now. Which I complained to you about this on on Hangouts earlier in the week, and you didn't respond to me because you're probably just like, what is he talking about now? But like, don't you think, like, how many console releases have there been now in the history of the video game industry? Don't you think that like producing enough units for all the people that want them could be something that they could get some data analytics into, so they don't have this shortage problem?
It happens every single time, right?
It does. It does every time. Every time there's a new console, there's never enough.
Do they do it on purpose?
They must.
I wonder if they do it on purpose to generate a sense of urgency, like, oh, you got to get it now because it's going to be sold out. Because otherwise, people might wait, and then they've got stock sitting on the shelves, and that's not good.
Sure. Yeah, I know Nintendo does it on purpose because Nintendo still runs their video game company as if they're a collectible toy company, in which the software has inherent value outside of being played, which I don't. Nintendo's a weird company. I don't understand why they behave like this. But like the other two companies, the big ones, Microsoft and Sony, they don't really operate like that. But I do think that just having that shortage at launch does create this feeling of demand. I looked at on eBay, and there's these things are for sale for like $1,500 on eBay, and someone's going to buy them, I guess, because they wouldn't be up there for that price if people didn't think they could get them sold. So someone's going to drop 3 times the MSRP for this thing because they want it right now. So they're doing a really great job bolstering a third party market to make some profit off these things. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't play that many video games, hence me taking 2 years to get to God of War. So I'm probably not going to get one of those for a long time. But it does sound like fun. So
I'm definitely going to get one. I hear the PlayStation 5 is like massive. Like it's like way too big. So it's going to be interesting figuring out where to put that in my setup. But
just for a second, like while we're just speaking of God of War, while we're talking about that, I was like so into it, even though I hadn't gotten very far into the game. I watched this 2-hour documentary about the making of the game on YouTube, and it was really like, just as a piece of documentary filmmaking, it was kind of fascinating because it was like, wow, you turned it into like a heartfelt narrative. This is they're making a video game, and you made me feel all these feelings and think about like all these artists sacrificing their relationships with their families to make this game, and make me feel all these complex things. And the protagonist of the movie, which is the director of the video game, is this tortured soul. It's just so fascinating to like follow his kind of weird personality and struggles as he successfully leads this thing from really chaotic beginnings where it's almost like this thing might not even happen, like it's a terrible financial situation, all the way to Game of the Year 2018. Just really a fun story, and really well told, and really impressive that they were able to do that. And frankly, I need a documentary crew following me around.
Yeah, let's make our own doc. Isn't there like a comedy about someone that just hired his own crew to follow him around in case someone wants a documentary? I feel like that's something.
If it's not,
it's Along Came Polly. God, how am I remembering that movie?
I don't remember that, but good pull, I guess.
No, I'm telling you, I'm right about this.
Okay,
right? It is Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in Along Came Polly is like a child actor who was like really famous as a kid and then like has done nothing with his life since then. And so he hired his own documentary crew to follow him around as if they're making like an True Hollywood story on his life, but he's just going to film it and then try to sell it to True Hollywood story.
That's hilarious.
That's not a good movie, but Philip Seymour Hoffman is amazing in it.
Of course.
All right. That was a great little random segue to some nonsense there at the end of our episode, which I think is what we do best.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I play or watch a thing, I have to talk about it on the Doofcast because it never happens.
Yeah, if that's how you know when Matt played or watched something, because if he's not, like, we haven't talked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I really want to talk about The Mandalorian with you, Matt, but you haven't watched it, so
Yeah.
we can't talk about it.
When would I do that, Scott?
I don't know. It's a great show with your children. You could just watch. You could just watch it with your kids.
Okay. I mean, I've heard that it's just really awful. But anyway,
What?
yeah, maybe I'll watch it with them. Yeah.
Wait, what?
No, I mean, all these horrible things happen. I hear on Twitter.
Oh yeah, this is the Baby Yoda controversy. The dumbest fucking thing we can't talk about it because it spoils the show for people that maybe haven't watched the second episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. But Christ, the Baby Yoda is canceled conversation right now is killing me.
I only vaguely know what this is. Yeah, it seems pretty dumb, but
it's super dumb.
Yeah, we'll talk about The Mandalorian at some point. I promise.
You watched the first season, right?
Yeah. I think we might have had an episode about the first season.
I think we did. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We're done. We're done. That's all we had for you guys this week. Let us know if you have any opinions on anything we talked about this week on Cronos, on Guillermo Del Toro in general, on The Princess Bride, or on God of War and Matt's perpetually late foray into very good video games from 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account @doofmedia.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find Kingslingers, our show talking about the incredible magnum opus of a work that is Stephen King's Dark Tower. This week on that show, we just finished book 6, so we are fixing to move on to the final book in the series, which is very, very exciting. And if you like Kingslingers, or you like the Doofcast, or you like any of the multiple shows we have over at doofmedia.com, you can consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Every dollar you donate to us goes right back into our company. It helps keep the lights on, keeps us in equipment, and keeps us making this show, which we love to do. So thank you to all of those out there who have become our patrons and have helped support us and help keep us growing. It's because of you that we get to do this week after week. So thank you.
Yeah, we're just burning through these microphones over here. So we just really, it's really high upkeep business.
Yeah, turns out like spit collects on the microphone over time, and when you've talked for 300 hours into a microphone, it just has this layer, and you can't get rid of that. That's really gross what I just talked about there. It's not true.
It's not true. I don't know why you said it, but it made me laugh, and so that's fine. That's what pop filters are for.
Yeah, I have one of those. It's right here.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, also, if you just want to put all that behind us, then consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, because every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. We will see you all back here next week where we talk about the second film in this Deconstructing Del Toro series. We're talking about Mimic.
And you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.
I have in Mimic, there's like a kid who has these two spoons, and he hits the spoons together, and it makes this noise. And I wish I could do it so I could have finished the episode with that, but I don't know how to do it.
Okay.